Prepare too fast. Forward.
Into the darkness.
Welcome to Slash Forward, the channel where we provide summarization and commentary on all your favorite popular and obscure horror movies. In this video, we're going to take you through the 2011 home invasion-themed film You're Next. Directed by Adam Wingard, this indie film was picked up by Lionsgate as a result of its strong showing at film festivals, and received a wide release in 2013. While it wasn't a blockbuster, it managed to gross significantly more than its modest budget, relying on strong writing, directing, and acting to create an intense atmosphere of tension, with a plot that unfolds in a way that contravenes normal expectations for this type of movie. In what way, you ask? Let's take a quick look. We start with a horror movie classic, opening on a sex scene. It sounds like a pleasurable time, but the look on her face indicates this may actually be regrettable sex. After he hoists himself off her and heads to the shower, she goes downstairs to make herself a drink. She's momentarily alarmed when the motion sensor lights turn on outside, but she doesn't see anything untoward. So she locks up and continues with her task. She plays some music from what, at this point, may as well be an 8-track player, and makes a refreshing cocktail. She takes a moment to both enjoy her drink and ponder her life choices while her paramour continues his post-coital steamer. Perhaps if he had done this beforehand, she would have found the experience more worthwhile. As we switch back and forth amongst scenes from within the house, we're provided only the subtlest hints that something may be amiss. A fine example of competent directing. We get a slow confirmation of our dread as the boyfriend finally finishes polishing his balls and comes out to the living room to discover a message on the window that indicates some sort of sequential preference. For what? We don't know yet. Whiskers can't help himself, and he absent-mindedly paws at this curiosity. He casually casts his gaze in a downward direction, catching sight of his beloved's bloody corpse. He does the next best thing to checking for a pulse, and attempts to flee. He's then attacked by a man in a mask with a machete. After this, we cut to two of our main characters, Paul and Aubrey, taking a scenic drive. Their conversation implies they are heading to a vacation home while also establishing how isolated that home is. Aubrey is played by fan favorite and classic 80s scream queen Barbara Crampton, who we met in From Beyond. Paul and B-Cramps, I'll work on that, arrive at the house to find the front door unlocked. Upon inspection, they determine that everything inside the house appears to be in order, and they conclude that the door was likely left open by mistake by the cleaner, and they begin to make the house livable. While this is underway, we get a brief sequence introducing us to the two main characters, Erin and Crispin. A relatively new couple, but a couple that's been together long enough for her to meet the parents and spend a weekend with the family at their vacation home. We get some dialogue to establish that the parents are loaded, and that the familial relationships are somewhat strained. Meanwhile, Krampus, sweeping up the kitchen, hears a loud noise upstairs. It's safe to assume the noise came from her husband Paul until he almost immediately shows up behind her, giving her a jump scare and confirming that he was in the basement. She has the right idea as she immediately recommends they vacate the premise. He takes the typical skeptical role of insisting the noise he never heard was most likely something it couldn't possibly have been.
It's just a creaky old house.
With that, he grabs a makeshift cudgel and heads upstairs to check it out. While going through the typical steps of alerting any intruders to his exact location,
Hello?
He at least turns on the lights as it goes. Just as he's about to open a door, Crispin gives him a jump scare, asking why Mom is downstairs crying. As they both head down, we get indication there was good reason to be concerned. Luckily for them, 10,000 BC is on pills for an unspecified malady, allowing them all to write the incident off to her silliness. Welcome to the family, Erin. Enjoy your weekend. With that out of the way, Erin and Crispin head off to bed with another expositional conversation. Crispin is nervous about how his brothers will present and gives hints that he may be a bit of a failure in comparison to the other members of the family. Well, nighty-night. In an overnight sequence, we do get one shot to confirm there's at least one person stalking the home from outside, as we catch a reflection of a weirdo in an animal mask in the window as Aubrey gets a drink in the kitchen. The next morning, Crispin goes downstairs to see that Erin has already met his douche brother Drake and his wife Kelly. They appear to be having a normal conversation until Crispin shows up, and Drake immediately lays into him, telling embarrassing stories, discussing his failures, and otherwise physically and emotionally dominating him.
That's right. It doesn't mean he's fat.
No, it means you're beautiful.
All the fat on him means he's fat.
Okay.
Erin finds her way into the kitchen and attempts to endear herself to Aubrey by asking if she can lend a hand. She's initially told no, but then Aubrey has second thoughts as she asks Erin to to go to the neighbor's house for some milk like it's 1952. It's hard to tell if this is some kind of power move. Erin definitely has a look on her face like she was expecting to peel carrots or something. Even so, she's willing, and her walking off gives us a natural transition into other areas of activity, providing us some interfamilial insights. The men are outside admiring some grainage. We learn that Drake is an excellent butt kisser.
Looks so good, Dad.
And that Crispin failed to get a fellowship he had applied for. We can tell that he expects excellence from his stock, and considers Crispin to be the lowest rung of the family hierarchy. We end the day's sequence with Erin failing to get anyone at the neighbor's house, while a familiar tune confirms for us that this was the house from the opening sequence. And with that, we transition to the evening, where we knock Crispin a few more rungs down the ladder as the rest of the family shows up. The third brother, Felix, with his date Z, Amy, the youngest sister, arrives with her boyfriend Tariq, a filmmaker. She actually does seem like the most normal of the siblings, and her breezy cheeriness stands out amidst the rest of the family. No wonder they dote on her. Aubrey thanks everyone for coming, and we get into the evening meal.
And?
Well, I guess not yet.
Thanks to Mom and Dad for having us all here together.
Butt liquor. Drake shows how cultured and intellectual he is by regaling Tariq with an exhaustive examination of the artistic power of commercials. However, before he's done crushing Tariq, he zeroes in on a conversation between Crispin and Erin, interjecting himself and creating conflict with Crispin. Both brothers are quick to confront, but slow to repeat or clarify anything that either of them say, resulting in a classic passive-aggressive grudge match. This level of childish repartee strikes Tariq as banal, but luckily something strange and interesting catches his eye outside. It's a crossbow bolt, much more interesting indeed. This leads us to an awesome slow reveal where no one initially realizes what's happened. As the pieces come together, they recoil in horror, immediately scattering. More bolts follow, creating panic and confusion. In the turmoil, Drake takes one to the back, but survives. Everyone else gets low. As they try to get help, the group discovers they have no cell phone signal. Isolation? Possibly. But then Felix offers up a ton of information about signal jammers. Erin takes control of the situation like a boss. Exuding confidence and self-assurance, she begins shouting clear, direct instructions that provide them with the strategy that gets them all out of the dining room free of any extra holes. She then provides them another solid piece of survival advice when she prevents them from removing the bolt from Drake's back. Despite common movie tropes, you gotta leave it alone. With slightly clearer heads, the group begins to work somewhat in unison, doing more than screaming and running around, and they decide they should make a run for the cars. This naturally devolves into a Crispin Drake dick measuring contest about who's the fastest, and ends with Amy asserting herself into the argument. Ready to prove herself and failing to recognize this situation is about risk mitigation rather than personal development, she insists that she is the fastest. They agree to let her embark on this journey of self-discovery, and she prepares for the task at hand. The idea is that she'll hit full speed as they open the doors for her, so she shoots out of there like a bat out of hell, creating confusion and giving her precious seconds to reach the cars. The scene has a tremendous build-up, expertly constructed of various pieces that create a mounting sense of anxiety that get us acutely focused on Amy as she bursts through the doors in slow motion, only to be instantly snapped into full speed as she snags her throat on a piano wire that had been strung across the opening. The full-speed clotheslining has Amy on the ground, back in the house with a gaping gash in her neck. Once again, the group finds themselves dumbfounded as they helplessly gawk at the horrific scene. Whereas the violence to come ramps up to the point of absurdity, this scene is played for effect. It's quiet and shocking, and the actors dig deep to sell the emotional impact of what they're witnessing. This represents the emotional crescendo of the movie. The director lingers here, wallowing in the aftermath for a bit, and it works well. It draws you in and quickly establishes a strong connection to what's happening by excellently demonstrating the stakes of the film and giving a glimpse of the full impact of the violence. But then we have to focus back on the task at hand. Erin runs off, but only to clear the upstairs and lock all the windows. She does this all fairly quickly. Assuming they are at least safe inside the house, the group takes a grief-stricken Aubrey upstairs to lie down and recover, and then they run off to help secure the rest of the house. Unfortunately, no one checked under the bed. With barely any time to process what's going on around her, an intruder slowly creeps out from underneath. He gives her a chance to recognize his presence before attacking her with a machete. Hearing her screams, the group runs upstairs to see what's happening, leaving Erin alone to continue securing the house. She goes into the kitchen to find some weapons, and in another fine example of smart decision-making, Erin immediately stabs the intruder, who pulls the classic grab through the window scenario. She then jumps back and grabs a fresh knife. Unfortunately for her, the intruder is now gone, and unfortunately for him, she now has a taste for blood. Upstairs, we get confirmation that Aubrey is dead, with a machete sticking out of her head, and see a familiar message on the wall. Everyone's pretty sad, but also remarkably casual given the evidence we now possess indicating that someone is inside the house with them. Kelly gets jump-scared and becomes too overstimulated to control herself. She runs off into the night. Drake attempts to catch her, but manages to twang his back bolt on the piano wire, resulting in shooting pain through his body. Fed up, he pulls that sucker out and then immediately faints. Crispin tries to come up with a new escape plan. Now the fastest by default, he intends to run out to the cars as a first step. He manages to make it out, having some extra time due to the intruders pursuing Kelly through the woods. We see that she ends up at the neighbor's house and attempts to get his attention through the glass, but he just sits on the couch like a lazy turd. Lammy shows her a way in, and a scene unfolds that provides Kelly a slow reveal of why she didn't receive any help, and ends with a brutal kill as the intruder tees up and plays mini-golf with her head and an axe. Crispin, meanwhile, discovers the cars have been disabled, so his plan won't work. He has to head back to the house, and we end the sequence with a cool shot that pans out as Lammy takes a breath on the couch. As they try to formulate a new plan, Crispin makes the assumption that Kelly likely made it out alive, having seen no evidence of carnage outside. Crispin decides to make a run for it all the way. He will head off into the woods, find some way to alert the authorities or get help, and bring them back with him. He heads out while the rest get back to business. With a smaller group, it becomes more obvious that Erin is the key to their survival, as she appears unafraid to get her hands dirty and is constantly doling out practical advice. She confirms there are likely 3 or more of them, and that they should assume that at least one of them is still in the house. They begin to move Drake to a safer place for nappy time. While talking to Felix and Z, Erin makes some offhand comments that really accentuate her level of creativity when it comes to violence.
No, the basement's a bad idea. They could just pour gas down the stairs and throw in a match.
They're just in the process of divvying up some weapons when an intruder sneaks in behind them. He makes the mistake of assuming the mystique of the mask gives him an advantage as he preys on the residents of the household. Instead, Erin unceremoniously nards him, and then, without hesitation, unceremoniously tenderizes the back of his head until she hears that low, satisfying crunch that lets you know he's ready for the roaster. Felix and Z are shocked by Erin's willingness to take action and do whatever's necessary. We see that Kelly was used to break through the window, and then they realize no one has seen Paul in a while.
Hey, where's your dad?
We cut to Paul stalking around upstairs in the darkness, checking all the rooms. He stumbles upon an abundance of evidence that at least one of the intruders has been living inside the house when he finds his makeshift bedroom and his makeshift bathroom, which happen to be the same room. The lights go out, so Erin goes to the basement to check the breakers while Felix and Z go upstairs to find Daddy. We see that he's being stalked by the upstairs killer, but a room check quickly replaces the killer with Felix. When they meet up, Paul fills him in on his working hypothesis. Based on the evidence he's found, he's concluded that this is no random incident, but that they've been targeted for some reason. He doesn't get a chance to expound on this any further as an intruder slits his throat from behind. Felix again sits back and fails to take any action, but in the aftermath of the slaying, we're let in on a little secret. Felix is in cahoots with the killers and Z is complicit. He hired them to slaughter his family for reasons not yet known. Having a moment to themselves, he voices his discontent for having his dad put down right in front of him like that. This was supposed to be a gentle massacre, after all. As Felix washes up and Erin lurks around in the basement, the lamb shows back up. He sees his dead partner and has an abnormally strong reaction to the sight. This makes Erin aware of his presence, so she attempts to shut herself into the basement. When she bumps the door, she makes the intruder aware of her. As she peers out to check if the coast is clear, we get a cool shot of unexpected eye contact through the keyhole. He immediately begins to hack his way in when Drake wanders into the scene, creating a moment of confusion that gives Erin an opportunity to stick him good, and he runs off.
Maybe they're gone. Maybe you scared them off.
Let's not count on that.
Sound advice. They regroup and decide their next steps. The boys go downstairs to collect weapons, while Erin and Z have some lady bonding time making crafts in the dining room. We come to find out that Erin's dad was a bit of a nutter, and that she grew up in a survivalist commune in the outback, an area where almost everything in the environment is constantly trying to harm you, resulting in her unexpected skills at both protecting and harming people. Downstairs, Felix decides to continue to tip the advantage in their favor by handling a weakened Drake on his own. Fed up with the disorganization of the basement, he uses Drake as a human pegboard and begins inserting tools into his torso.
I'm sorry.
Show it, don't say it. This goes on for some time.
Did you just die already? This is hard enough for me.
Oh, well, sorry for putting you out. While this is happening, Z ponders the notion of braining Erin with a nail board, but isn't fast enough. Erin leaves her to finish up and goes to get Paul, who Felix and Z said was resting upstairs. Z instead unlocks and opens the front door. Now upstairs, Erin finds Paul dead. Realizing she's in danger, she takes quick action, hurling her hammer behind her and flinging herself out the window. On the ground, she manages to orient herself and runs off into the woods despite a large piece of glass now protruding from her thigh. She rests against a tree and, for reasons unknown, does exactly what she knew not to do earlier by pulling the glass out. Ah, that's in there deep. Under the light of her flashlight, she sees the screwdriver she previously gifted to the intruder, and immediately runs out of there as a crossbow bolt whizzes by and lodges in a tree. She gets inside and hides, so she has an opportunity to address her wounds. The lamb pops his head in the window and sees the trap previously set. Confident he's foiled their little plan, he hops off the windowsill and gets Daniel sterned. We get a great shot of him stomping around that really demonstrates how in there it is. I mean, that nail is a part of him now. Felix, still upstairs, hears the commotion and gets uppity with the help.
Would you mind checking on that? I believe this is what I'm paying you for.
He backs off on this, but he was right to say his piece. I mean, shouldn't you be concerned? This is a life and death situation here. They all end up downstairs and Felix offers some helpful advice.
You don't want your DNA in here, man.
They have a detailed conversation about the remainder of the plan, cluing Erin into the remaining details. We find out that the dead intruder was the lamb's brother.
You want to talk about brothers? That's my brother. Laying dead right there.
Sorry, man, you made your choices. We also find out that the motivation behind all this was money. Felix doesn't want to wait for his parents to die of old age to get his inheritance, and he doesn't want to share with anyone else. However, now that the stakes have been raised, he has to peel a few more bills off his roll to entice them to continue their killing spree. Erin, having previously attempted an emergency message in the hope that it would find a moment of clear signal, is now rewarded for her foresight with an inopportune return call from the local authorities. She readies herself, and when the curtain opens, she gives a quick but hearty throat punch and runs off. Outside, she immediately doubles back into the house, fooling all but the leader. He decides to check to make sure she didn't circle back, and despite the complete lack of peripheral vision the mask affords him, pokes his head into the window. In return, he gets his head poked back by Erin with a knife, thus ending his evening of pain. And then we have yet another movie with a frickin' booby trap. At least this one's consistent with the plot and the characters' abilities. Felix and Z continue down the road to see if they catch up with Erin, while the final intruder goes to make sure she hasn't circled back. Erin prepares for his return by breaking all the light bulbs in the basement and setting up a mini-rave with her point-and-shoot camera, another relic of a bygone era. He should know exactly what's up, but heads straight toward the light source regardless. Does he think she's back there taking pictures of a model train or something? While he's distracted, Erin, clever girl that she is, comes in from the side and smashes him up real good with the log. She then makes sure he's good and dead while the lights strobe, providing us with a really cool shot. While searching for a weapon, Felix manages to land a shot with the crossbow, or so it appeared. He heads in to finish her off after grabbing a knife from his trunk and turning off the phone jammer. They meet each other in the kitchen and ramp up the carnage to an 11 as Erin both takes and metes out copious amounts of punishment. It just so happens that the nature of the fight results in a broken blender carafe blades getting crammed into the top of Felix's head. Erin then flips the switch and frappes his brain. After this, she pulls a knife out of her shoulder and bifurcates Z's cerebral hemispheres. With the signal back, Felix gets a phone call. Erin answers it but remains silent. We find out it's Crispin on the other end. Getting no response, he assumes Felix is just mad at him and does the only rational thing by talking in a way that implicates him in the conspiracy to murder his whole family. Crispin returns to find Erin holding the phone. He attempts to justify the plan by explaining how much money they stand to inherit if she goes along with it, and further reassures her that she was meant to be an independent witness to the events that transpired. Everyone had explicit instructions not to hurt her. He does his best to sweet-talk her with cold rationalism.
I know you've got your student loans. How would $500,000 go towards fixing that problem?
But she's in more of an emotive state. Right when it seems like the whole thing is over, Erin gets shot by a police officer who finally made it to the scene, and just in time to witness the one act of violence that appears most unjustified and makes Erin appear most guilty. He calls for backup, and we're left to wonder how she's going to manage to get out of this situation, until we see him heading for the front door.
No, don't!
And that's it for Your Next, a high-octane invasion film that doesn't always follow conventional lines. This movie's much better than your standard multiplex horror film and deserves a place on any list of great modern horror. Its attention to detail makes it worth repeated viewings. Even when you have a good, general idea of the flow of the movie, it's still interesting to go back and watch it with an eye toward all the little verbal and nonverbal interactions between the conspirators throughout. There are tons of little details that subtly connect everything together without giving anything away, making it fun to watch specifically when you know exactly what's going to happen. And with that, I've exhausted the words I have for Your Next. I hope you've enjoyed the video, and thanks for watching.